A real pleasure to welcome and introduce Tal Nathan from Global NTT, who is speaking on, well, look, AI is ready. Are you? Tal, over to you.
Thanks, Tim, and good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be presenting to all of you on a topic that I'm really passionate about. AI is something that's been around for a really long time, and I'm going to take you through and demystify what's real, what's fad, and how to apply it within your organization. What I really like to do in these presentations, and I've done that for the last 3 years, is a bit of a party trick. I'm not too sure how it's going to work online, so let me describe it to you and you can use your imagination. So generally, I am on some kind of stage and you all are sitting as participants around a table. And what I do is I ask a question and I ask everyone to put their hand up and keep their hand in the air if they answer yes to this question. And the question that I ask is, have you or are you planning on running some kind of Gen AI or agentic proof of concept within your organization? And believe it or not, without fail, for the last 3 years, every single person in the audience puts up their hand. I say, whoa, hold on, keep those hands in the air. And then I ask the next question and I say, put your hands down if your organization has failed to productionize that proof of concept, or if you suspect it is unlikely to be productionized. And again, without fail, half of the room, if not more, puts their hands down. So there's still a few hands remaining in the room in this scenario. I ask the next bunch of questions. The next question is, are you confident on the total cost of ownership for running this model or the proof of concept? Hands goes down. The next question I ask is, are you concerned around data quality, data privacy, or reputational risk as it relates to that proof of concept? And by the end of that, without fail, there isn't a single hand left up. Or in some extreme cases, there may be 1 or 2 hands left in the room. And why is that? The reality is that the majority of Gen AI proof of concepts fail to operationalize. We've seen this ourselves. You've seen the stats. I've seen it firsthand working for a global consulting organization. We ran hundreds of proof of concepts globally, and we have generally found that the majority, in the high 90s%, fail. But the main reason that they fail isn't because of the technology itself. Largely speaking, the technology does what it says on the box. It fails for other reasons. It fails because of organizational maturity, and that's the bitter truth that we all need to swallow. The other thing that we need to understand is that AI isn't new. I can share my own personal experiences. I've been in the AI space for more than 20 years. I founded an AI company all the way back in 2008 that was focusing on natural language processing and semantic technology. All that has changed today is that AI is now accessible through language, through English, and as a result of that, it's really exploded and become contemporarized. So let's go a trip down memory lane just to understand how did we get to the point where we are today. And you may be surprised to find out that some of those legacy technologies that we've been using for decades are still relevant today. So I'm going to start the story all the way back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that was really the start of digital computing. And what I call this era is the statistical dawn. We have had statistics for eons, statistics like linear regression as an example, the ability to take a bunch of data, do a bunch of processing, and get some kind of statistical output to determine what is the likelihood of something taking place. What is this likelihood of an organization having a liquidity challenge? What is the likelihood of this medication impacting a cohort of people? Suddenly, we had the ability through computation to run these very complex statistical models. And guess what? Back then, that was called artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is almost like pop music. What is defined as AI at any given point in time is whatever the technology that's available. And if you fast forward to the 80s and 90s, we had these things called expert systems. So large monolithic applications that had a bunch of business rules hard-coded into them. So you could have health applications, as an example, that help you manage acute care within a hospital setting, that do everything from patient admissions all the way to medication dispensation to make sure that you're not getting too much of a certain medication, or that you may not have a reaction due to allergies, as an example. And guess what? Most organizations are still using these large AI expert systems with defined business rules that are baked in. And today they're called legacy applications, but by and large, every major government department, every major global financial institution is still using these systems today. And then we get to the 2000s and 2010s, the explosion of big data and machine learning, largely thanks to the explosion of the internet and the cloud. Organizations have realized data is valuable, and that data needs to be organized in a central repository to make sense out of it. So we had things like data warehouses, then we had things like data lakes. Today we've combined those two words. It's called a lakehouse, largely really the same thing. It's the ability to be able to work on structured and unstructured data and make sense out of it. That was called AI back then too. And then here we are now in this generative AI agentic model. It really is just another layer in the technology tool stack. Think of it as another tool in the toolkit that organizations can use to make sense out of their data. But why has the world gone so crazy about this technology? I have a very simple theory. All of these technologies that I've described from the 50s all the way to the 2010s and 2020s, they relied on a programming language to be used to interact with the models and the technology. So languages like R, languages like Python. When OpenAI launched a large language model for the entire planet, suddenly the programming language was language itself. And as a result of that, it democratized the access and capability of every single human on the planet to be able to engage with AI in a way that wasn't possible before. So it's not that AI is suddenly new and that it suddenly appeared in the last couple of years. All that changed is technology now understands language, and that language can now be used to interact with technology. And that is profound, but it is just another layer. A question that I get asked all the time is, what's going to happen in the future? I don't know. No one has a crystal ball. We can assume it's going to be highly autonomous. We can assume there'll be embedded intelligence. Will it be a scenario of the humans sitting in the Stanford while the robots tend to us? I suspect not. I think humans' ability to create complexity is quite profound. But what I really want to talk to you all about is the things that we're doing wrong. So I described that exercise I usually do when it's a live audience around showing how a lot of these proof of concepts fail. And the best way for me to describe why it fails is to use a very quirky analogy, an analogy of a salad. So just bear with me on this one. Imagine you're an organization, a major global packaged food organization. That's the business that you're in. And the marketing department comes in one day and says, we've got the next $1 billion idea. It's packaged salad. The business is all excited. They think, fantastic, packaged salad is the next big thing. And they set up a laboratory with the chefs and the food scientists in place. And they start working on devising what is the way to make the best possible salad. So the right amount of tomatoes, right amount of cucumbers, just the right amount of dressings. They get potential consumers to go in there and do a taste test, and they're blown away. They've created the best salad you have ever tasted, and the executives are excited. They think it's going to make billions. So they go to the business and they say, okay, we've made the salad. Let's now call the retailers and start getting it on the shelves and start productionizing it, so to speak. So the business turns around and starts asking some questions like, we're assuming you've got supply contract with local farmers to get the produce 24/7, and you've got a harvest cycle. You did that part, right? And you've got a distribution channel to get the produce into the manufacturing plant. And we're assuming you've set up a manufacturing plant, right? And you've trained individuals in order to make this salad. And there's a cold chain process in place to deliver these fresh salads to the distribution side of the retailers. No, we just made a salad. Now, that's ludicrous. You'd think that would be something you'd find in a Dilbert cartoon. How could a food manufacturing organization be so silly to spend months creating a salad, knowing full well the value proposition of a packaged food organization is their supply chain, it is their procurement contracts, it is their manufacturing plants. It's not actually making the salad. That part is easy, but that's exactly what all organizations are doing globally. They're making the salad. They're building models in a lab, in a perfect environment, trying to solve some kind of agentic or Gen AI use cases, and then they fail to go into production because they fail to realize everything else around the organization has been ignored, and that's actually the hard part. So a bit of language you can use within your organization. Are you building infrastructure and supply chain, or are you just making a salad? The next question I get asked all the time is, will AI take my job? Probably not, but possibly in the short term. There's definitely going to be a bit of disruption. But I'd like to think the world of atoms and molecules is going to beat the worlds of ones and zeros. If you just bear with me for a moment, imagine a human child in their first 4 years of life. We assume if you convert all of our senses, sight, sound, touch, etc., you can extrapolate that is the equivalent to around 10 million bits per second. The average human child, by the time they're 4 years old, would have processed 143 terabytes of data. That's only one child, and that's only in the first 4 years of life. To put that into context, 143 terabytes is larger than the largest large language model. They're generally in gigabytes. In fact, it's probably larger than all large language models combined. While these technologies are absolutely profound, they are limited to what they can see, which is data inside of a data center that they have access to. Their ability to scale, to process the amount of data that humans processes, all of the offline analog type of interactions that take place, don't underestimate our capability. And we only consume 20 watts of power per brain, so we're incredibly efficient at doing that too. So I think we're okay for now. So then what are the things that then one should consider? So we spoke about building supply chains, not making salads. The other things that an organization needs to understand is, why are they applying these technologies? Again, as a consulting-led organization, we always ask the why. And there's generally 5 key areas that we find that organizations want to focus on. The first one, an obvious one, is improving productivity and efficiency. Every single organization wants to do more with less. They want to automate. They want to standardize. They want to remove cost within the organization. The second and third one are quite similar, and that's around ESG metrics and compliance. The compliance and regulatory burden for organizations is significant, and having the ability to automate and standardize it reduces cost, reduce overhead, and reduces risk. The fourth one is around employee experience. I'm in a relatively new function within the organization, and I've had the benefit of hiring some incredible new people within the organization. By day 2 or day 3, they approach me and say, "Hey, Tal, where do I get access to some of these AI tools? You don't expect me to write a proposal from scratch," as an example. So employees are now demanding having access to this technology to be productive. And the fifth one is maintain competitiveness. So find out how to generate more value. Now, this is what we get out of surveys, and it's consistent with other data that you'd see in the industry. In my humble opinion, we have this the wrong way around. Number 5 should be number 1. I get the temptation of wanting to remove costs. That's obviously low-hanging fruit for any organization. But the reality is that the tide is going to rise with everyone equally. And what I mean by that is, in the year 2025, no CEO or CFO stands in front of analysts, in front of the market, and says, "We are a world-leading, efficient organization because we use video conferencing," or "We are a world-leading organization because we use email." You'd be laughed at. So to be perfectly frank, a lot of these tools are going to be standardized across the board. They're improving productivity and efficiency. There'll be a lowest common denominator, and every organization is going to use the exact same employee workplace types of productivity to get to the same level. The organizations that will have outliers, that will have outright success relative to their peers, will be the ones that figure out not how to save $1, because that's easy with respect. Saving $1 is fairly straightforward. How do you generate $1? That is far more difficult and far more challenging, but far more valuable if you get right. How can I use these technologies to enter new markets, to build onto my products and services, to generate growth? And you can fund that in the short term by removing operational overheads in order to do so. But removing cost on its own without thinking of how to improve your competitiveness, I believe, will be a very, very short-lived strategy. So we spoke about the opportunity, but what are some of the challenges? Because the challenges are profound and they don't involve chopping tomatoes and cucumbers. They're a bit more complex than that. The first one is that lack of strategy. It may surprise you to find out, but if you walk to any organization at a board level or a C-suite level and you ask them, what is your business strategy and how does that align to artificial intelligence and how does that roll out? They would have no idea. They would have a traditional strategy that talks about business strategy, capital allocation, and growth. And then they will have an IT department that talks about the technology strategy. That is never going to work. As organizations rely more and more on technology to trade, your business strategy, your AI strategy, and your IT strategy needs to be one and the same. Organizations that understand how to push AI into the boardroom in order to talk about how AI can transform the business strategy are the ones that will be more successful. The other one is time to value. If you don't have a long-term strategy with these technologies and it's short-term, just around quick fixes, then your time to value is going to be incredibly challenging because you're going to implement one of these proof of concepts and you may find 20, 30, even 80% efficiency in some kind of process. But the reality is, unless you're able to remove that cost, that efficiency can't be translated to the income statement because you're simply looking at cost. You're not looking at value generation through reduction of risk, through quality, through the generation of new revenue. And again, that becomes a challenge. The third one is technical debt. I believe this is one of the greatest issues. Organizations are underestimating their need to drive an application modernization strategy to drive it through. So let me give you a real live example that'll be clear to all of you. I won't give up on the region because I don't want to disclose that. But I was talking to a regional organization that does air traffic control. And my party trick is asking these individuals, how can we use AI to replace a process? And they're all very honest. I said, you know what? For the most part, for an air traffic controller, you probably can use artificial intelligence to automate a lot of these challenges, to identify, which... when a pilot has to land, what is the altitude they need to fly, where's the runway they need to touch down on. A lot of these things can be standardized and automated, but there's a little bit of a problem that we have over there. Right now, what we do is we rely on the captain to communicate to us and let us know where they're heading, what is their altitude, and we manually put that into our system. A modern transponder today on an airplane transmits a lot of telemetry around the airplane that can be used to create automated processes. And they sometimes use things like flight radar, publicly accessible information to access that. Why? Because the technology that they're using for air traffic control is 20 years old. It predates a lot of the newer versions of the transponders that exist on the aircraft. And as a result of that, they simply do not have the ability to process and ingest the data from the aircraft in order to drive that through. Now, think of a mission critical system like air traffic control. You can't just upgrade that overnight. You need a strategy and a roadmap to drive that through. Your technical debt will cause you to sink if you don't have a strategy of how to uplift it. The fourth one, which is quite obvious, is around security. Organizations not understanding the right security posture and strategy that they need to drive it through. And the fifth one is too much choice. This one is absolutely staggering. We have run hundreds of proof of concepts globally. And the reality is those can be distilled down into a couple of dozen. Most organizations are doing the same types of proof of concepts, but most organizations are doing ones or twos, not hundreds or thousands. So they're trying to reinvent, what is the best way to build a RAG model? Should I go public or private? How do I optimize my tokens for cost and efficiencies? You have all of these organizations reinventing the wheel, trying to solve the same problems that have been solved again, as opposed to going to a partner that has done this many times over and probably has a blueprint or a reference architecture or best practice to get that up and running. So my advice is don't go at it alone, because odds are what you are doing is not unique. Someone has done it before. Yes, there may be those absolute edge cases where you're doing something that's totally out there that no one's ever done that before. But I can assure you from my own experience in the world of consulting, that is astoundingly rare. And then we get down to AI readiness, and that's really the topic of this presentation. The proof of concepts that you're all driving, you are doing that in order to evaluate whether a technology is sufficiently mature for your organization to consume it. I think that's wrong. I think what you're doing is you're actually evaluating your own organizational maturity. Take self-driving taxis as an example. You could go to Houston, Texas today, and you could download the Waymo app, and a completely autonomous taxi will arrive and take you from point A to point B. Take that exact same taxi into my hometown in Melbourne, same car, same technology, same sensors, same software, same everything, and it won't work. What's the difference? Well, the difference is quite obvious. In Houston, they changed the environment, they changed signage, they changed traffic regulations, they skilled up the local traffic department in order to have the ability to use self-driving vehicles based on the technology that exists today. And in other jurisdictions, when they have not done this, they're unable to do that. And that's analogy translates into organizational maturity. There are organizations today that have the ability to consume some of the incredible technology that exists today, and there's others that do not. The difference between the two isn't the technology. The technology is largely a commodity. You will all have access to the same technology. Maybe a bunch of you will be inventing your own, but again, that is quite rare. Most of you will be consuming off-the-shelf capability, and your differentiator isn't the widget. Your differentiator is how you change your organization to be ready for these technologies. And the second thing to understand then is then the value of data, because your two differentiators is your organizational maturity and your own data. So sticking to the automotive theme, take Tesla. Love or hate the brand, they objectively have the best self-driving technology in the world. Now, you'd ask yourself why. I can assure you a Tesla has been stripped to the last bolt in Japan, in Korea, in China, in Germany, in every major automotive hub on the planet, and they would have come up to the same conclusion. It is cheap commodity hardware and software that anyone has access to. That is not the unique differentiator. The unique differentiator is that Tesla very early on realized the value of data, and for more than a decade, they have been logging all of the telemetry of their drivers through their connected vehicles, and they have billions and billions and billions of kilometers that they have logged of every single edge case you can potentially imagine. And as a result of that, they were able to build self-driving models with data that no one else has. That is their moat. That is their unique advantage. It's not the gadget, it's not the widget, it's the data. So again, food for thought of how you can apply that within your own organization. So then how do you become ready? What are the things that you need to do? Our advice is always these 7 pillars. Once you have your AI strategy in place, you understand the time to value, you've done an assessment around your technology debt and what you need to do, run a maturity model for your organization across these 7 areas. First one, and many organizations would fail in the first one, is who owns AI within your organization? It can't be a department. It can't be one function because it's got to span across the entire organization. So what is a central global governance board that is set up to view that? The second one is the operating model. What is the policy and framework of how you're going to drive it? How is funding going to be distributed into the organization? Is it a hub and spoke model as an example? Does every department need to come up with their own funding? How is that going to work? Then you've got to run a risk compliance and security capability. Again, a central function that defines and monitors these capabilities so you don't reinvent the wheel. The fourth one is central data management. Data will be the fuel within your organization as to how you drive that through. So your data governance, your data quality, data privacy, and data access will become critical to being successful. Obviously, the tools and technology that you use from an AI perspective. And the sixth one that everyone ignores is AI lifecycle. This isn't a fire and forget. You don't deploy these technologies and these models and you're done with it. There is a much shorter life cycle that you need to drive these in minutes, hours, or days, not in months or years that we're used to with typical technology. These models need to be tweaked, monitored, and continuously fine-tuned in order to be effective, which then takes you to monitoring. You need to strategize. How do you monitor the business value, the impact, and the quality of these capabilities coming through, especially when you're going with agentic and you're impacting things that impact customers or it impacts financial metrics within the organization. How you monitor and drive that becomes really, really critical. Without these 7 pillars, it's going to become incredibly challenging for you to scale efficiently within your organization in order to operationalize all of these incredible salads that you build together, because you need farms, you need distribution sites, you need warehouses. It is far more complex than the widgets itself. And the next thing I'd leave you with is the why you can't perform while you transform. I'm a firm believer that you cannot run an organization on slogans and taglines and build the airplane while you fly it or transform while you perform. That sounds really good and really bold. Odds are it doesn't work. Reality is most organization staff are focused on business as usual, and business as usual consumes 24/7 of their time. So asking BAU resources to down tool and drive a transformation that will fundamentally change the way an organization operates is an impossibility in terms of capacity. And the second one is change rarely comes from within. You're asking people to reimagine the way work gets done. And it's incredibly challenging to reimagine the way work gets done if you have a team of individuals that have done that for the last couple of decades, because the status quo is what kills a lot of these transformations. And you really do need that outside in, fresh perspective and thinking in order to drive that transformation. That's where organizations like NTT come in. We take incredible pride in our ability to take a holistic top-down approach as to how we drive an organization's transformation, beginning all the way from strategy and governance, understanding what is your business strategy, where is your maturity, what is your current operating model, to the selection of the tools and technology that will allow you to scale and drive that through our pre-baked reference architectures and models where we have done it before and we can validate what is the cost to run and the likelihood of success based on these capabilities, all the way to driving the transformation. And driving the transformation means putting pods and people on the ground to fundamentally transform the way your business operates. And we have found that is the best approach to go from hypothetical proof of concept to real sustained transformation that will drive business value. I hope you found this informative. Really enjoyed providing this presentation. If you'd like to carry on the conversation, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Would love to chat to anyone. Thanks so much.